UK, respected Mr. Rahul Singhi sir, Director Poornima Group, Honorable Professor Mahesh Bundele sir, Director and Principal Poornima College of Engineering, and all the participants of this international webinar. I, Dr. Pallavi Mishra, on behalf of Poornima College of Engineering, welcome you all in today's international webinar. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speakers. Dr. Peter is a senior lecturer in medical education in the Faculty of Health, Social Care and Medicine at Edghill University. He is program lead for the Foundation Year to Medicine. Dr. Peter is also a member of numerous faculty committees related to teaching and learning. Welcome, sir. Our second keynote speaker, Dr. Manisha Sharma, is a passionate educationist and public health nutritionist. She has been working in the public health sector for the National Health Services. Dr. Manisha is also a member of Nutrition Society and Association for Nutritionists in the UK. Welcome, ma'am. Now, I would like to invite Professor Mahesh Bundele, sir, Director and Principal, Poornima College of Engineering, to
warmly welcome Dr. Peter and Dr. Manisha. It's very fortunate part for us that both of you have agreed to guide us, guide our students, guide the participants regarding this particular situation and the scenario which we are facing today. I hope that the participants would be greatly benefited of your lecture on introduction to health behavior with reference to diet and nutrition. So it is specifically, although may not be, but you will, I think, discuss about the current situation also. That will be related to. So apart from diet and nutrition, so what kind of care I think should be taken under this COVID-19 situation, that also need to be discussed, and some input regarding that. So I hope that on behalf of Poornima College of Engineering, I welcome you both at the panel, and thanks for accepting the invitation and delivering this particular talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your profound words of wisdom. Thank you. In today's talk, Dr. Peter and Dr. Manisha will be discussing on an introduction to health behaviors with reference to diet and nutrition. Now, without taking much more time, I'm handing over the session to Dr. Peter. Sir.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and I believe it's good afternoon in India. It's good morning here, so thank you. As was just discussed, I'm Dr. Peter Ledbetter. I'm a senior lecturer in medical education, and this webinar or talk is about introducing health behaviours, particularly the social determinants of health from my perspective, and then talking about diet and nutrition. And Manisha is going to come in and talk about diet and nutrition within groups and with a particular focus of India. Okay. Before we start, and I don't want to do a sales promotion or anything, but Edghill University is situated in the northwest of England. We're one of the largest providers of health and social care professional training within the northwest of England. We sit about 40 minutes from Manchester and about 40 minutes from Liverpool. And we have a number of different courses in nursing, midwifery, paramedic practice, operating department practice, social work, and applied health and social care. And applied health and social care includes disciplines such as nutrition and health, child and adolescent mental health, counseling and psychotherapy. And recently, we've developed a medical school. We did have a postgraduate medical education group, but this year we'll be taking undergraduate medical students for the first time. And we were one of only 5 new medical schools in the UK. I think about 20 schools applied for funded places, and we were one of only 5 successful schools. So that's where I am. I'm in the School of Medical Education. And I just want to start by talking about what health is, and I apologize if I'm stating the obvious, but typically when I think of health, and when I speak to my students when they think of health, they think of being in the absence of something as not being unwell, as in being healthy is about not having the flu, not having a sickness. And that coincides with the biomedical model, and where we explain all diseases and illnesses by looking at physiological processes and injury and biomedical imbalances, bacteria and viruses. So that's the way a lot of students that we see look at health, purely from this biomedical perspective. But as you know, health is more than that. Health is also about the physical, the mental, the social, the psychological, the spiritual. So it's complex. And there are a number of different factors that can influence someone's health. And that's, I guess, is the aim of what I'm introducing today. Okay, and this is a model, and you may have seen this, you probably have seen this, that I introduced to students early on. And it looks at health from a social perspective. And it looks at the social determinants of health. It starts to unpick how complex health is. It looks at age, individual factors, it looks at broader social factors, and then it looks at community and society factors as all influencing someone's health. Now, this model was first developed by Dahlgren and Whitehead in 1991, and it's something that I know I use and a lot of my colleagues use to introduce students to health as well. But if we break the model down, there are various layers within the model as influencing someone's health. And again, apologies if you know this, but I think it's important to state this up front. I think firstly, there's the individual factors such as age, sex or gender, and hereditary factors such as genetics. They all influence our health. We're all predisposed to certain conditions. Then there are, of course, the individual lifestyle factors, which some people call lifestyle choices. And for me, this is a whole different discussion. I think they are choices to a certain extent, but sometimes I don't think these lifestyle factors are choices. But they refer to health behaviors such as smoking, alcohol, drug misuse, poor diet, and lack of physical activity. Now, in the UK, the top 5 killers or the top 5 reasons that people die are to do with individual lifestyle factors, as well as these other factors, of course, but they're to do with health behaviors. People in the UK are dying of issues related to dying of cancers, heart disease, lung disease, liver disease, strokes at huge numbers. And these are to do with the choices or the lifestyle choices that people make around smoking, drinking, alcohol, and physical activity. Of course, there are hereditary factors as well, but I think it's mostly to do with individual choice and lifestyle factors. Within the Dahlgren and Whitehead model, they also stressed the social and community networks as being important for health. And you all know this, but family, friends, and the networks that we're involved with are all very important for someone's health, not only in staying healthy, but also avoiding poor health. And they act as a protective factor in health. If you've got a strong family and social support network, of course, they're going to assist you in maintaining your health and going to help you if you do become unwell. And as you know, it's the quality of those relationships rather than the actual number. But also there's the living and working conditions. These include access to and opportunities in relation to education, training, employment, health, welfare, housing, public transport, but also the very basic needs such as running water and sanitation, and access to essential things such as housing, food, and clothing. And the final layer in the model is what we call the general socio-economic, cultural, and environmental conditions. And these extend beyond the living and working conditions to include things such as your actual wage, your income, your availability to work, the prices of fuel, transport, food, and clothing. Now, all these factors, I think this is a good model that I stress to students about the factors that influence your health and how complex health and health behaviors are. Within the UK, and I think in a number of countries around the world, what we have found, and not me personally, but what a lot of people have found, is that socioeconomic class is perhaps the most major influence on health and health behaviours. And of course, it includes a number of the factors that I've just described, but particularly living and working conditions, socioeconomic and environmental conditions. But class, as you know, socioeconomic class or class is really, really complex. Typically within the UK, it's defined by policymakers, by sociologists, by government officials, by looking at things such as your occupation, your income, your education, and your housing. And then these factors, as you can see, are interrelated. Clearly, your occupation is related to your income, which is normally related to your education, which of course impacts on where you live and the type of accommodation you have. But as we know, class is complex. And I think it's something I stress to the students as well. I get them to sort of look at me and make a judgment on my class by the way I talk, by the way I dress. So it's a really complex phenomenon. But what we find in the UK and throughout the world in a number of places is that class is one of the biggest influences on someone's health and their health behaviours. So people from lower classes, as a trend, not always, but typically, experience higher disability rates, higher morbidity rates, higher mortality rates, and have a lower life expectancy. So I guess a summary sentence is the lower the social class, the lower the health status of people. Now I've put this YouTube clip here. I won't show it to you, but I'm sure I can pass the slides on afterwards. In the UK, we call this the Glasgow effect. I think that's a really good example to demonstrate this. As you're probably aware, Glasgow is a city in Scotland, and it's an area where the social class gradient in health is most prevalent. And there's a quick 7-minute clip from the BBC, which talks about the Glasgow effect and the differences in health and health-related behaviours for people within that city. Okay, and the reasons for the social class gradient in health. It's complex. Again, there are a number of different reasons, but clearly the main reason for the social class gradient in health is poverty and resources, or lack of resources. Not having enough food to buy food or good quality food, and being forced to live in poor quality housing in high crime areas, perhaps areas where it's not easily or applicable to exercise, to undertake physical activity. So areas which aren't conducive to good health. And what we also find is, understandably, lower class people are less educated and have less knowledge of healthy lifestyles. There is, within the UK and Europe, and indeed a number of countries throughout the world, class differences in health-related behaviours. I keep talking about the UK, and Manish is going to talk a lot more about India. But in the UK, what we find is that the lower classes typically are smoking more, are drinking more alcohol, have less exercise, and that's due to all these factors. And also more dangerous jobs of lower class people. And I don't just mean dangerous jobs in terms of risk at work, but also the protection that comes with jobs. I'm fortunate here. I have a good job in the UK. I have a pension, I have sick pay, I have protection, I have, it's a job I can do long term. These sort of factors aren't applicable to a lot of people in lower class and lower classes. And of course, all this has an impact on someone's self-esteem and someone's motivation throughout life. And the argument is that all of these factors combine in that typically, although not always, people of lower class have more stressful lives. So all these factors impact on health and are the reasons for the social class gradient in health. There is a lot of evidence to support this. So I'm not making this up, and you know yourself that makes a lot of sense. But for the last 40 years, the government has commissioned independent reports to look at the social class gradient in health. not directly, but to look at health of the population. And you may have heard of some of these reports, but the first, I think the most influential, was the Black Report in 1980. And we've had the Aitchison Report in 1987, the Marmot Review, and various other independently commissioned reports by the government. And all of these reports found evidence for the social class gradient in health. And that is, again, the things I was saying before, that the lower your social class, typically the poorer your health. And that's to do with things such as income, unemployment, poor environment, poor housing, and lack of education or lack of quality education. I don't want to sound too political, but I will say this, is that often the government commissioned these independent reports. The findings, especially early on, weren't what they expected. So I would argue that sometimes the government, in response to these reports, have blamed the individual for their health status, has blamed the individual for having poor health. And yes, there is an element of choice. I understand that. But there's also broader issues at stake, such as education and inequality. So I'll move on from that point. But finally, my final point when talking about class is not only is that poor health can lead to a fall in social class position, but also that class can be a risk factor for poor health, and poor health can be a risk factor to lower class. So it's complex. It can be a vicious circle. Someone becomes unwell and they can't work for long periods of time. They're obviously at risk of losing a lot of resources, a lot of health, and dropping in class. A couple of other things I wanted to just quickly explore before passing over to Manisha. Gender and health in the UK, and this is almost 20 years old, this quote, but I really like it, by Arbour and Thomas. And they suggested that women are sicker and men are dying younger. So this is, again, is something I stress to my students. This is saying really that women are more likely to seek help from health professionals when they are unwell than men. So they're more likely to access the health services. And that's also due a lot to do with the roles that women play in society, you know, taking care of the children and so on and so forth, and taking the children into sort of health professionals and health clinics. So they're more likely to access services. Men, typically in the UK anyway, are less likely to access the health services. And when they do, it's often when something is quite serious. And that's one of the main reasons that men are dying younger. Okay, but it's also, so it's about this use of and access to health services. But men are also, particularly young men in the UK, are more likely to engage in risky behaviours that can affect their health. And maybe not straight away, but can affect them long term, such as alcohol and drug use. And I like this bit at the end, and it's from a labelling theory, which is a well-known theory. But there's an argument that people are under or overdiagnosed based on their gender. And we don't have the sort of the freedom to discuss this in detail here. But I like this sort of, again, another quote, that women are mad and men are bad. And what I'm saying essentially is that what we find in the UK is that women are more likely to be given a mental health diagnosis, okay, when they're adopting risky health behaviours, and men are more likely to be in the criminal justice system. Okay, so it's an argument is that that's partly to do with labelling theory, the way we label men and women in society. Okay, the other point I wanted to talk about is ethnicity. I don't have the time or the resources to cover all of these sort of sociological factors. But as you know, ethnic divisions and inequality influences health throughout the world. But in the UK, I think a problem that we have in the UK is often people attribute poor health to certain ethnic groups, and that is the case. But it's mostly, and I think sometimes, to do with the social class. So what we might find is that particular ethnic groups might be prevalent in one class. So a particular ethnic group might be mostly lower class. So their poor health is to do with more with the class-related factors than their ethnicity. But as a trend, generally ethnic minority groups report ill health at higher rates and at a younger age in the UK. Okay, typically there is, as you understand, there's considerable variation within and between groups. One of the problems that we find is that often officials and research lumps entire diverse groups of people within the one bracket or category when talking about health. So they might, for instance, talk about the Indian population as one homogeneous group. And of course, that's almost meaningless because, as you know, India is very, very diverse. So that has its own problems. But having said that, I'm about to contradict myself, but what we've found in the UK is that South Asian, particularly Bangladeshi and Caribbean people, report the poorest health. Okay. African, Chinese, and Indian, typically the health is the same as the white British population. And normally they have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, yet lower rates of cancers. And I think a lot of that is to do with immigration, in that a lot of African, Chinese, and Indian immigrants have been here for generations and are British. Okay, but of course it varies by gender, generation, and age. Again, I'll quickly cover this, but I'm a psychologist, so I couldn't help but put in a couple of psychological factors as well. And the couple I want to cover is self-efficacy is influencing health. And I'm sorry if this seems obvious, but self-efficacy is about how much a person believes he or she will succeed. So someone with high self-efficacy, who believes they can succeed, who believes they can change their health behaviors, who can remain healthy, is more likely to succeed. And that makes sense. And that's affected often by previous experience in that situation. So for example, if someone wants to quit smoking, and they've attempted to quit smoking in the past and been successful for a period of time, then of course they're more likely to quit smoking and have higher self-efficacy. But of course, self-efficacy is also to do with psychological factors, such as self-esteem. Someone doesn't feel very good about themselves, they're less likely to believe that they can achieve things. The other variable, or the other kind of model I wanted to introduce, is the locus of control. And it's something I talk quite a lot about with my students. And it measures the amount of control that people feel they have over their own health. Now, it's a continuum from internal to external locus of control, and we're all probably somewhere towards the middle. But someone with a high internal locus of control believes that they can change their own health. It's up to them individually. They're responsible for their own health. Someone with a highly external locus of control may believe that health is due to things like luck or fate, religion, spirituality. And most of us are somewhere in the middle or towards the middle. But the research indicates that someone with an internal locus of control is more likely to adopt healthy behaviors or to change their health in a positive way. Final psychology, and I won't go through these in detail, but of course, health is affected by things like stress, anxiety, depression, personality, self-esteem. And with regards to personality, for instance, risk-taking behaviors have been associated with extroversion as a personality trait. Neuroticism has been associated with eating disorders and poor eating behaviors. So there are links to all of these factors. But I guess what I'm trying to highlight is how complex health is. Now, it's due to gender, age, ethnicity, social class, personality, a range of psychological factors. They all influence someone's health. Now, the final point, I guess, is this is something I tell the students and ask the students to discuss. This group of people have Khazarians who live in Georgia, Turkey. Some of them live in Ukraine and Russia, the former Soviet Union. They're a unique ethnic group. Okay. Now, in the UK and the USA, typically about 3 out of every 100,000 people live beyond 100 years. Until recently, there was evidence to suggest that up to 300 out of 100,000 of this group of people, the Abkhazarians, live beyond 100. That may be over-reporting, but there is little doubt that this group of people, a larger proportion, lived to long age, to old age. Now, the question I pose to the students is, given that they live in a remote and poor area of Europe, why do they live a lot longer than us? You know, we would class them, looking at the way I've described today, as being lower or working class for most of these people, but they live longer than us. And of course, they're to do with the reasons I've just cited. Typically, this group of people, they eat well, or they used to eat quite well, grow a lot of fruit and vegetables, they eat very little meat. They often grow the produce themselves. They're physically active, and a lot of them do physically active work that is not overly strenuous. But I think most importantly, this group of people have a very, very strong social and family support network that protects them and helps them with regards to their health. So that's the reasons that I stress to the students of why they live a lot longer than us. So I guess I bring that in to stress that it's not just about class. It's complex. It's a range of factors that influence someone's health and someone's health behavior. And I guess this is my summary before handing over to Manisha to explore this in more detail with reference to India, is that within the UK, and indeed a number of countries throughout the world, diet has the strongest association with social class than any other health behavior. And there is a lot of evidence that people from lower class have poorer diets due to a lot of the factors that I've just discussed. Okay, I've put in some references and from some citations, if anyone wants to, if I can pass the slides on after the session, if that's all right. Thank you very much for listening. I haven't been disturbed by any children yet, so let's hope that carries on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable and interesting talk. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Manisha for her talk. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Thank you for handing it over to me, Peter. I'll just put my slides on and then I'll start. Can you all see my slides now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me for a talk with Dr. Mishra. And I'll just start with some facts about nutritional guidance, because I'm going to cover the dietary aspect of health. So the objectives of today's session would be first to evaluate the importance of generalized, stratified, and personalized nutrition guidance. And then I will critically analyze the age and gender specific nutritional requirements. This is a very well-known fact that a healthy population is the key to economic progress. So whether it is at a household level or whether it is national, healthy population is key. This is a global health profile. So this graph shows a population distribution. As you can see very clearly, the half of the population in the world is suffering from undernutrition, whereas the other half is suffering from overnutrition. There is only a very small ratio of people who are getting normal nutrition. So this is an eye-opening fact. As you can see that it is showing both people who are suffering from undernutrition and overnutrition, they both can have malnourished. Because malnutrition is basically bad nutrition, and it could be due to excess or lack of nutrition. So there is a misconception that people believe that only people who are going through undernutrition can suffer with malnourishment. Though the truth is that people who have excess of nutrition could also suffer by malnutrition. And the unfortunate fact is that malnutrition is estimated to contribute to more than 1/3 of child deaths, which is a very shocking and appalling figure in this new modern era. So I'm going to talk about the importance of nutritional guidance in context of India. So before I start, I'll give you some facts that I have taken from National Health Profile 2019 and WHO Health Profile of India 2016. So the some facts are, first of all, India suffers from dual burden of overnutrition and undernutrition at the same time. If we see at the data about non-communicable disease, around 5.2 million people died of non-communicable disease, such as diabetes, strokes, and cardiovascular disease in 2016, which is a huge number. And if we see the rate of diabetes, there are estimated 72.96 million cases, which means every 1 in 6 person in India is suffering from diabetes. The life expectancy is 67.4 years for men and 70.2 years for women. So if we see our position in world ranking, we rank 125th out of all the countries, which is again very shocking because we are world's 7th largest economy. So how can we fix it? I would, suggest 2 things. The first is by improving accessibility and affordability of nutritious food. And the second is nutritional guidance for all. Well, improving accessibility and affordability is beyond, an individual capacity. It is obviously government's role, and they are definitely doing something about it. But as a nutritionist, I'm going to talk about nutritional guidance for all. So nutritional guidance can be given on 3 different levels. It could be general healthy eating guidance, stratified dietary guidance, or individualized dietary guidance. Starting with general guidelines, well, as it is very obvious from the title, general healthy eating guidelines are usually given around general food facts, such as, telling about macronutrients, micronutrients, and fluid intake. So in these guidelines, people usually talk about, what carbohydrate, fats, and proteins are, which ones are good carbohydrates, good fats, bad fats, and how much vitamins and minerals intake is required, and how much water or fluid intake is necessary. A very good example of general guideline is Daily Dietary Recommended Guideline for Adults. So as you can see here, this is a guideline that I have taken from National Health Services UK, but it definitely applies to anybody who's adult. So it gives you a general information around how much energy intake there should be, how much fat should be consumed, saturated fat, carbohydrate, protein, followed by sugar and salts. But the only problem I can see with this is it gives you a general guideline, which is like 2000 kilocalorie per day. That can be questioned because an 18-year-old hyperactive person who's involved in sports and who's very active, how can you compare their diet to a sedentary 80 or more than 80-year-old person? So there are some pros and cons of general nutritional guidance. Pros are it is essential, because very basic nutritional advice is given there. So obviously it should be open to all the population. Everybody should know. It's very easy to understand because it's very straightforward. And it is necessary for general nutritional awareness. So this is essential for mass public. Though there are cons, because it is not very precise, the approach is one size fits all, which is not the reality. It does not differentiate for individual needs. And most of all, it is difficult to apply on everyday meal choices, because obviously a lay person, a general person, wouldn't know how much 2000 kilocalorie would be. How would they measure? So they don't know how much 90 grams sugar is. So it could be very confusing for a general person. Now, the second kind of nutritional guidance is stratified nutritional guidance. It is given personalized to group or clusters of people which share characteristics such as age, gender, weight, interests, or health status. For an example, I can see that you can develop a nutritional guidance for a group of teenage girls. There could be a nutritional guidance for people with common interest who want to lose weight, or there could be a group guidance for people who are pre-diabetic. So because they all share a common interest, it would be interesting and informative for those groups. A very good example of stratified nutritional guidance is dietary reference intake tables. As you can see, this is a dietary reference intake table for micronutrients, and it describes the nutritional requirement for different groups of people, like infants, children, different age groups, males, females, pregnant women, lactating women. So as you can see, the dietary requirement of micronutrients is different in every age group and genders. So for an example, I'm going to present 3 examples of 3 different groups of women, and that would be adolescent female, which is teenage girls, pregnant women, pre and post-menopausal women. So this example will show you that how the requirements of individual group and prescriptions for the individual group should be different. So the first one is dietary recommendation for adolescent or teenage females. As you can see, they are obviously rapidly growing females at that time. So their intake of calcium and vitamin D is recommended to be high than the rest of the group, because it would prevent low bone density and rickets. They need extra iron to prevent iron deficiency anemia due to blood loss in menstrual cycle. And they need extra zinc for essential mineral growth. And most of all, they need different nutritional advice for common health compromising eating behaviors. Because at this age, they are suffering from many different social expectations. They have to fit in with their peers. They are under pressure to fit in a particular social stereotype, like losing weight, looking good, but at the same time they want to go out and socialize with their friends. So they will go out, they will eat out. So all these things affect their health behaviors. The third group I have chosen is dietary recommendation for menopausal women. Menopausal women, it is an age when they start the estrogen levels. The estrogen levels are low at this age, so their bone density can be affected. So more calcium and vitamin D is recommended for this particular group to prevent osteomalacia and osteoporosis, low bone mass, structural deterioration, and porous bones, because that can lead to fractures in the old age. They need more vitamin B complex and vitamin E, omega-3 fatty acids for their brain health and to keep their memory intact. Because after the age of 50 or 50, 60, the brain cells start deteriorating, which can lead to dementia or Alzheimer's sort of problems. They need extra phytoestrogens to keep their estrogen levels up. Phytoestrogens are usually available in abundance in vegetables and fruits. So they are recommended more fruits and vegetables and less energy dense food at that age. And one thing that the requirement is reduced at this age is iron, because they stop having periods, so they don't lose iron every month. So that's why they don't need iron supplements at this age unless they have got some other problem. So the problems with stratified nutrition guidance is obviously it is specified. It is very specific to group characters, so it may not address the individual needs. However, there are some benefits as well. And the benefits are, they are more specific to groups with general characteristics. And because it is delivered in groups, it is more economic and it can save time. And it is specific to groups, so they can share the motivation to work together. Now, the third kind of nutritional advice is personalized nutrition guidance. This is very new and still in its infancy. There's a lot of research going on and people are highly interested in this kind of nutritional guidance because it is targeted to individual needs according to their genetic information. And it is based on nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics. So I'll tell you the basic concept around this kind of nutrition guidance. First, it is based on nutrigenomics. Nutrigenomics is a study of how interaction with dietary and environmental factors influence gene expression. So in common terms, I can say that it is basically the study of how your surroundings and your dietary choices and lifestyle choices affect your gene structure in long term. So the belief is that if people are given their dietary advice according to their genetic structure, in long term, if they change their dietary advice and they start having healthy meals and healthy lifestyle, in long term, their genetic expression or genetic structure will change. And if they have some risk of developing certain conditions like diabetes or strokes or any other non-communicable disease, the risk goes down because their genetic structure is changed in long term. So the goal of nutrigenomics is to improve health by tailored diet and lifestyle prescription. Nutrigenetics, on the other hand, is the study of individual differences at genetic level, because they believe that it influences the response to diet, which means in simple terms, we can say that your genetic structure somewhat decides that what would you like as your diet, what would your lifestyle would be like, because whether you choose a lazy lifestyle or an active lifestyle, it is somewhat determined by your genetic structure. So in long term, the goal is to use that genetic information for prescribing dietary advice or lifestyle advice. So basically, we can see that these two things are interconnected with each other. So we can start with studying somebody's genetic structure, and then we can provide them a prescription, which would in long term change their genetic structure. Again, if they have a risk of developing certain type of disease or maybe gaining weight, it can be changed by dietary prescription. And it would be embedded in their genes then, which they can pass on to their generations. So we can say that by doing that, in long term, we can change the whole genetic structure. So people who have the high risk of developing non-communicable disease can reduce their risk. But again, like other dietary advices, personal nutritional guidance also have their pros and cons. The strength of personal nutritional guidance is that it is very personalized advice, so it could be more effective. Moreover, it is based on genetic information, so people can argue that it is more scientific. And because the consumers of personalized nutrition, they usually choose to go for that kind of guidance. So they are highly motivated people, so they are more likely to follow the dietary recommendation. But at the same time, there are some flaws in this advice, which is it's not enough evidence available to support the benefits yet. It's still in its infancy. There are a lot of research going on, but unfortunately, to date, there are not any regulatory bodies. So there could be many people out there who claim that they are giving personalized nutritional guidelines, following the guidelines and giving the guidance based on genetic information, but it could be a hoax. They might not be following the rules. So it is very difficult to know, who's a genuine person and who's giving accurate information. There is more expensive to get genetic information because it includes genetic testing and genetic information. And most of all, it could be used to achieve personal goals. So it can widen the gap in the society because not everybody can access to these kind of guidelines because it costs money. So it can be argued that it can be expensive and not everybody would be able to afford it. So to conclude, I would, if I'm asked that which one is the best kind of nutrition guidance, I would say that all three methods can be used simultaneously to target bigger population and achieve individual health goals. And with my passion in the dietary habits of Indian population, we are conducting a research at Edge Hill University. The title of the research is Exploring the Dietary Choices of Indian Population Living in the UK and India. It is a mixed method research, so we'll be collecting both qualitative and quantitative data. And the qualitative data has already been collected. And if the circumstances of this COVID-19 allow, we will be starting our quantitative phase very soon. So thank you very much. I would like to thank Dr. Mishra and Poornima University for inviting us for today's talk. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please feel free to ask any questions if there are any. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this valuable session. I hope everybody is curious to ask a lot of questions, but due to shortage of time, I'll be able to share a few of them. One of the participants has a question. How can we distinguish between nutrigenomics and nutrogenetics? Are they related?
Yeah, well, as I have shown in the diagram, they are both interrelated things. Because I'll give you a very simple example, that the whole process starts with studying a genetic configuration of a person. The structure is studied well. And then according to that structure, they are given a dietary prescription. And it is believed that if the change is for good, in long term, it will change the structure of genetics in that person. So which would be only beneficial for that person, but that would be inherited in the future generations as well. And then obviously that information would be used to see what kind of likings and dislikes that person has got. And then they will have a prescription based on their likes and dislikes. So nutrogenomics is about changing the atmosphere and dietary prescription for the betterment of health and avoiding the risks of developing any kind of non-communicable disease. The nutrogenetics is basically a study of genetic structures for knowing people's likes and dislikes, and then using those likes and dislikes and designing a prescription to, again, making them follow those prescriptions. So for example, if by nutrogenomics, if we have come to know that certain person has got a special liking for fatty foods, now we know that that person has got, so we will share this information with the person, and then we'll make a change in their diet, and that dietary change ultimately will reduce their intake of fat, and in long term their genetic structure will change and their liking for fatty food would reduce. So I hope that makes sense. Or
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful explanation. And I hope today's webinar will provide an opportunity for all of us to leap forward to greater success. And we'll be sharing some more questions from our students via mail because we are falling short of time. And I wish to express my sincere gratitude to our speakers, Dr. Peter and Dr. Manisha. We all had a wonderful time listening from you all. And I would also like to express my sincere thanks to all the participants for their full cooperation and the contribution towards this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
thank you very much for listening to us. We really enjoyed the session, delivering this session. And
thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for listening to us. I can pass on, you've got my email address, so I can pass on the slides. And if anyone's got any questions directly, they can contact me via email.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.